Hey, welcome to the Big Money Management YouTube channel. My name's Jonathan Burgess, and today we're going to be talking about how to keep your estate and heirs out of probate court. Now, this is a commonly discussed subject upon a lot of my clients, and I want to make sure that I cover it with you today. And you might be watching this video because you have had trouble in the past with probate and you want to know how to avoid it for your family. So let's go right in and let's talk about why should someone want to avoid probate. Like I said, you may have had a bad experience with a friend or family member who's gone through the probate experience and known that whenever something like this happens, the government gets involved. It can be a hassle, an expense, and a delay. So what is probate? Probate is whenever someone dies and they have something in their name. By something, this could be real estate, an investment account, things that don't have beneficiaries named. So whenever this happens, a lot of people commonly think, well, if I die and I have a will, then boom, it's just going to go straight to whoever I say in the will. However, you still have to go through the process, and the judicial system, this is the key word here, the judicial system is still in charge at the end of the day if you only have a will. The will is simply a document suggesting what you want to happen. And at the end of the day, it is the strongest suggestion that there is because it's your estate. However, if the judicial system sees it in the best interest of the parties involved for that to go to someone else, then very well it could be passed to someone else. And common mistakes I see on this too is people write their own will. They never have it notarized or filed with the state. And if you don't have one there to notarize the document, in a lot of states, it's not void again, because you wouldn't just want someone random to show up to your probate hearing and say, hey, Mr. So-and-so wrote this will for me, and it shows that all the assets go to that person who showed up and they forged the will. So in a lot of ways that protects you too, but there's a way that you skip this altogether, because whenever probate occurs, assets are frozen. You can't touch financial assets. You can't go in and get possession of the house. You have to wait till all these assets go through probate vehicles, everything like that. So there's a way to avoid all of it together. And how we avoid it, number one, is we see an estate planning lawyer. Now, we have attorneys that we work with here in South Carolina, and actually our attorneys work nationally, but you want to go and you want to see a lawyer. You want to see a qualified lawyer, someone who does this every day. You don't necessarily want to go and see a general practice, someone who does personal injury law. You want to see someone who is an estate planning. It'll say either estate planning or elder law is commonly referred to as estate planning, elder law. And whenever you go to this person, they will help you set up a trust. Now, a living trust is what avoids probate. And how it does that is it is an entity. And when you think entity, think LLC, a business, corporation, something like that. You have that same sort of filing with the state. You file an entity. So whenever you set up a trust, there's a couple steps to setting up a trust. There's the trustee. The trustee is the person who controls the trust. And in a living trust, that's commonly the person who has the assets. So for instance, if I set up a living trust, more than likely I'm going to be the trustee of my trust while I'm alive. And then when I die, there's a successor trustee that's set up that would come in, and that would be like your executor, the person who comes in and makes all the decisions, or not decisions, you made the decisions, but they make the dictations to your beneficiaries of, hey, this is how this goes, and they make sure it all goes as planned. The next thing that you will have in that trust is your beneficiaries. Now, what happens is, instead of in the prior scenario, you have a will, you pass, it goes to probate court, and they're sitting there and they're looking at that will in probate court. Whenever you have a trust, a living trust, when you die, there is what's called a pass-through will, and the pass-through will names the trust as the owner of everything. Literally, it just says all of my assets, all of my remaining assets go to my trust. And when that happens, you completely skip the probate process. It's literally the shortest will. It's called a pass-through will. So, and then once you have the trust set up, you would have the terms of the trust, and a trust is going to be better in the way that if you have, let's say you have a couple $1 million, and especially for people with hundreds of millions of dollars, this is not even a question if they have one of these, but if you have a couple $1 million and you've got an 18-year-old son and you don't want to give him all that money right away, you could say, hey, he gets 10% at 18, and then you slowly disperse it to him over time. You could let it continue to grow in those investment accounts, etc. But you let that continue to grow, and there are terms in the trust. Even you could say like he has to be alcohol free, drug free. He could have to pass tests before he gets access to the funds. But that's a little bit deeper. Again, we're talking about how to avoid probate here, so we're not going to dive into all the different types of terms, but it does give you more flexibility there. Okay, so now we know we need a trust, right? If you have more than one, really, if you have assets, and when I say assets, it's really up to your discretion. Like, hey, what do I want my family to be subject to whenever I pass? Do I want them to go through the hassle? If you don't want them to go through the hassle, I would just get one. But whenever you're talking about you have assets in excess of $1 million, you definitely want to do this. But what you do is you create the trust. Okay, you go see the lawyer, he helps you create it. Then the next thing that you do is you fund the trust. You put certain assets inside the trust. You don't put certain assets inside the trust, and sometimes you put other assets. And the next slide I go to is going to be what types of assets go into the trust. So you fund the trust. The trust at the end of the day is it's not utilized properly until it's funded, and then we maintain the trust, and we meet with that attorney usually annually to go over and make sure, hey, are all these things still in the order that I would like them to be in? So we're going to maintain the trust, make sure that it is always put forth the way that I want it to, because really this is one of the most important steps once you have it set up. Because think about who your best friend was 5 years ago. They're probably not still your best friend. So, and you may have them in your trust. So what you want to do is you constantly want to maintain that where you have kept that up to date and everything goes the way that you want it to. Okay, so when we fund the trust, so we're just going to be talking about funding here. So when we fund the trust, there are things that always go into the trust, never go into the trust, and sometimes go into the trust. Okay, always, the things that are always going to go into the trust is real estate. You're always going to put your real estate in there. You're always going to put your business interest and your investment accounts, because these are the things that are most commonly held up in any type of probate. And here too, whenever I say investment accounts, I mean after tax. So that's going to be like a brokerage account, non-retirement accounts. Okay, after tax brokerage accounts, business interests, and real estate, always going to go in there. What is never going to go into a trust, a 401k or IRA? Those vehicles have to be made in the name of one individual. You can't have a joint 401k or a joint qualified IRA. We're just talking about qualified plans that have never been taxed. These have to be in an individual's names, because once you turn 72, the government's going to dictate that you start taking distributions off of those. Anyway, long story short, if you were to put this money into a trust, it would avoid that. So the government, you don't put this money, 401k or IRA, never, those go into a trust. The beneficiaries are always named on those anyway, so they'll just go straight to the beneficiary when you pass. Now, the beneficiary of a 401k or IRA can be a trust. So those can be a trust. Another thing that you'll want to keep in mind here is you'll always, if you've got life insurance policies, you'll want those always to be we'll put life insurance. You'll always want to put those as your beneficiary. The trust is the beneficiary of the life insurance policies if you have kids under 18 years old, because if the life insurance, let's say you and your spouse get into an accident, it's paid to your estate. In that case, you have kids under 18, it's a whole headache with probate about the guardian. Now those assets would be paid to your estate and they would be frozen and you would have to wait. So you always want to put the beneficiary can be the trust here on those accounts. Sometimes bank accounts, vehicles, non-titled assets, this is going to be like paintings or jewelry. So here you can put specific things like that into the trust. Those sometimes go in the trust. Typically on the back of your living trust document, there's going to be a section and lines where you can just go in and say, Sally gets my 10-carat ring, Bill gets my Escalade, whatever it is, and you just go through and you list all of those, and you can put those in there, but they can specifically name them in the trust. But more often than not, there's a title back there, or a title page on the back, where you could just go in and fill in those assets like this. So baseline, this is it. If you are worth any type of money, and you do not want your family to have to go through the headache of dealing with the probate court, you want to get a trust. It's one of those things where you go through and check the box. It's like the spring cleaning of your finances. Make sure you have them in order. Make sure you're skipping all this, doing this correctly, so your family does not have to go through that probate process. Let me know if you have any questions. Definitely share and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see you back here for anything and everything money. Check us out, Big Money Management.